Hello, and welcome to a very special bonus episode of What the Tech from Boast AI. Today, Boast AI's own VP of Product John Karayel and VP of Engineering Suresh Joshi discuss how AI will transform R&D, exploring how AI transcends the boundaries of solving individual business problems, will become a catalyst for making ROI-driven R&D decisions. This conversation features our Senior Product Marketing Manager, Asad Ali, and was originally featured as part of Boast AI's weekly Innovators Live on LinkedIn. Throughout, John and Suresh discuss how, through AI-driven analytics, organizations will be able to gain the ability to unlock the vast potential hidden within high-quality and extensive data sets. This invaluable resource will equip businesses with the foresight and precision to navigate the intricate landscape of R&D. The conversation also aligns closely with our recently published ebook, How to Use AI for R&D. You can find the link to download on the podcast website, boast.ai, and pinned on our LinkedIn page. Hope you enjoy the show.
Amazing. So we are now live, and welcome to another session of Innovators Live. Today, I'd like to welcome John and Suresh, both on our VP side on senior leadership team. John handling our product and Suresh on our engineering team. Welcome. How are you both doing today?
Doing great. Thank you for having us. Appreciate it, son.
Absolutely. Today,
likewise.
We have a very exciting topic that I can't wait to talk about, and we have some great thought leaders in this for the conversation. But really, today's topic is we will be discussing how AI will be transforming R&D. And I'm glad to have the two of you here because you both know this topic better than anyone at Boast AI. Before we begin, really, any initial thoughts you'd like to share with us with the topic and how you think things have been changing? But really curious to know what you think.
John, you want to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think before we do a deep dive into this topic, there are a couple of things that I think it's worth mentioning. There's an ever increasing volume of data. We have more data than ever before, and that's not a surprise to anybody. With that happening, you also have an escalating complexity of data that is happening as well, right? Like as we collect more data about our customers, market, external, internal environments, there is, with ever increasing volume of data, there's an associated escalating complexity of data as well. And at the same time, there is a demand for rapid insights derived from data as well. And that is limited by the data literacy and data culture within organizations, which we are, I believe, hoping to shed some light on. With what we see from our perspective, it's not by any means it's the only way of doing anything, but with the ever increasing volume of data, escalating complexity, and customers, stakeholders wanting to see more rapid insights, there are certain trends that are happening. So I will just start with that, and Suresh, if you have anything to add on, we can go into the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the problem statement of R&D is very clear. Don't need to repeat it, but it's always about accelerating the pace of innovation and at what cost, and how can you get quality talent to enable that, right? So that's really the journey of R&D. And I think we all understand, as John said, it's like a layered cake. You have the data layer, and then you have the insights layer, and you have the predictive layer. And I think what we are seeing right now is a complete transformation in the industry on how you can at scale apply the predictive layer. So R&D insights layer helped you get insights into decisions made in the past. And I think, the predictive layer is actually now going to accelerate how you can course correct as well as make decisions of the future. So to me, that is really where the shifts that are happening in the industry.
Absolutely. Now, with that, speaking of transformations, now here comes my first question. Really, how do you think companies have traditionally approached R&D decisions? And then I'd like to explore a bit more on how AI and BI has been applied to companies to drive decision-making itself.
Yeah, for sure. I can take a jab at that question. From what I have seen, and including our own use case too, not only with other companies that I have worked with, but with Boast as well, companies have traditionally relied on manual processes and expert judgment and past experiences to make these R&D decisions, right? Like, and the one of the biggest limitations of that is the fact that this data is siloed And even if data is not siloed, if it's shared with other stakeholders, it's partial. It's not complete. It does not display the full picture. Articulating qualitative data into some sort of a quantitative format, which is most of the time is one of the biggest challenges of R&D, and making thoughtful R&D decisions that may drive ROI is very challenging, right? So I think this is mostly how it has been done, but with some of the advancements that are coming right now, not only we can solve for historical problems of data being siloed, but what we believe is that we are actually unlocking capabilities that have never even existed before by being able to combine structured and unstructured data and running analysis based on that through various ML algorithms that Suresh is very familiar with. And that would be, I guess, the 2 points that I would make is the fact that traditionally it was all sentiment based. I mean, there was definitely a quantitative side of the equation that is complemented and sometimes even guided by an expert judgment that a lot of companies are still trying to unlock and essentially code it into a system, right? And I think we are still in the early stages of this. So
that makes a lot of sense. Suresh, thoughts on your end?
Yeah, no, thank you, Visad. I think John's point on, when I think about traditionally how AI has been applied, and just going back in my experiences, what I've seen, it's really point business problems to be solved at scale. And what I mean by that is classification problems, matching problems. I had a great journey in e-commerce space, and I think from what I can recall, catalog matching, deduplication, right? These are the areas where I think we're trying to apply AI in the past, and the challenge always has been the quality of data, as John said, and it's also about your ability to and wherewithal of the company to some extent to train data. Now a lot of that is changing and transforming with the developments in LLM, and that's where the shifts are going to happen. Deep learning to some extent gave you better results on these points problems, but I think what now we have an opportunity is to look at the entire R&D space and look at investment decisions, look at cost decisions, and be able to predict success and open up that black box of R&D to some extent to move from more what we used to call prescriptive analytics to more predictive analytics at scale, which was impossible for smaller companies in the past. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Really, now I'm a bit curious to really understand, what do you think are the opportunities for applying AI for R&D, let's say with developments such as OpenAI?
Yeah, I can take the first stab at it, and I'll let John add on. I think to some extent, if you think about it, going back to that layered cake example, the quality and completeness of data has been paramount. But the challenge in the past with traditional AI has been training, sampling strategies. Those types of challenges prevented companies who are much smaller to being able to effectively get insights from using AI for R&D purposes. I think some companies were able to do a good job of actually building data warehouses and getting insights based on work that is in progress, but that's just looking back. It's not looking forward into predicting what types of projects might be successful. And that's kind of where I think the developments on LLM side, in some sense, are actually leveling the playing field in my purview. And we are yet to see, this is just the beginning. We still are seeing a lot of application-driven opportunities created for the point problems for smaller companies. But when you think about R&D, it's always about plan, invest, operate optimally, and measure your ROI. Right? That's the life cycle. When we think about that life cycle, now imagine what questions are the operators asking, what questions are the C-level asking, what questions are your investors asking in each of these phases. It's how am I invested? Is my investment in the right initiatives? Are they going to be successful? what are my blind spots in my investments? How long is my platform runway? What are my blind spots there? So as you start to walk through this, you realize that a lot of times decisions are lagged because your metrics and insights are lagged. And so that is where AI comes into play. And with the predictive analytics and the ability to apply the layer of AI on top of your analytics, I think you have now the opportunity to help companies run their R&D driven by ROI more efficiently. That's kind of the opportunity ahead.
Yeah, 100%. And to add to that as well, I mean, when we specifically talk about R&D, there's a lot of data input that happens on the project management side by utilizing platforms like Jira, ClickUp, Linear, GitHub, Bitbucket, right? And really being able to run analysis on that data set will only yield output as good as the input with traditional methods, because if the tickets have limited information, as we all know, in any product organization, I mean, Jira is most of the time a source of the truth, but we try to do as much as information possible. But being able to essentially take those data inputs into all the way to business outcomes is where the gap happens, and that's usually is reliant on the product division, and but it is a bit of an art itself, right? So when you retroactively look at all of this data set and try to identify patterns and insights, it's mostly reliant on human. Like, it's me going in and looking at, with Suresh, for example, how much we have spent on the specific initiatives in a particular quarter or 2 quarters, right? This is very transactional. It's kind of like a diagnostic way of looking at it, but it is very linear. If you were to enable AI to look at this data, and if I were to just give an AI engine, please provide me, if you were to look at this 1,000 tickets, and if you were to run, 5 different project descriptions that you determine based on the themes that you see within these tickets, what would be the outcome, right? Like, and I think that is very powerful. This is something that we internally started doing by utilizing our tools, but it's really identifying these patterns and insights that AI will enable for us to essentially parse and map data in many multiple ways is always going to surpass Suresh's and I ability to essentially be like, okay, we have spent this much capital, on these initiatives that is determined by our product roadmap, and therefore let's see what happened with them, right? So I think that is the most exciting part when it comes to this opportunities for applying AI for R&D, being able to not only look back at historical events in a way that can really amplify the different patterns that we will ever be able to map as humans, but it's also, once we do that, is also predictive side of it is also another part of the coin as well.
100%. I mean, AI is so powerful. I mean, the Boast AI team was just at Collision, and there were so many AI companies and how they were leveraging AI to make their products work. Really, with that comes my next question. With so much AI around and so many companies now essentially using AI, what do you think are the ethical concerns, and how can we make AI practices more responsible?
I can maybe start with this, but this is an interesting topic. And I mean, there's a great show in Netflix. It's called Code Bias, right? And I highly recommend for anybody to watch it, especially if you're in a medical field. Like, there are certain implications, like with the examples that are given. And there is a risk of bias in any AI system, really, which can lead to unfair outcomes, right? And we do need to consider the impact on specific jobs, because I think it is very interesting the way this evolution has been happening. It is very good at telling you what you want to hear, because you are already looking for a specific answer, and that's why you are actually prompting that question when it comes to non-technical qualitative analysis. But that is not necessarily a replacement. It's a complementary input to the existing work that is happening, right? So from a responsible AI practice, I think it should never be mistaken for the data that we may be able to generate ourselves. but it is meant to be an enhancer, and it is meant to be a complementary. And I think this is where the fork kind of happens, right? Because if you start relying on these tools too much, it can essentially become the sole decision maker, where it was just meant to be an enhancer for the decision that is already being made as an extra additional data input.
Yeah, I can add a little bit to it, Asad. I think the ethical concerns are no different than the ones that have existed for time immemorial, right? If you think about the biggest barrier to pace of innovation is cost. And the second part, which you almost always forget, is the quality of talent. In AI is only serving as a way for humans to learn faster. Humans learn from machines, and machines are learning from humans, right? So in many ways, companies are there to obviously serve a purpose, and a purpose that hasn't been solved, and innovation that hasn't been done, and something that's redundant hasn't been automated, and in the process make profit. None of this is changing. I think what is changing is we have to be very conscious, as John said, as to how can we best leverage AI to solve problems that accelerate innovation in areas where they haven't been solved before. And I think that becomes possible to a great extent. While these developments that have happened in whether it's tech revolution in terms of the movement to the cloud, tech revolution in terms of where jobs are done, what jobs make sense to be done where. I think these questions almost always raise ethical concerns. But when you think about how much progress humanity has made, in the end, as long as we are recognizing what the talent pool, what the scarcity, what the need created by a new technology is, these are actually helping humans progress as a race. And so in my mind, I think AI is only humans learning from humans faster, and it's no different than what has happened in the technology space, except it's happening at a magnitude, and it's a much more bigger shift than it has happened in the past. Now, of course, there are several risks to AI itself that we need to be careful about, because humans learn from machines and machines learn from humans. There is always a component of bias. We start to trust things. I think trust is going to be a very critical equity. At the end of the day, the AI solution that actually provides explainability is going to be the one. I was in a discussion with some buddies over the weekend, and one of the things that came up quite a bit, and a lot of these folks are in the AI domain and tech domain, and common point of view was I think the whole thing about explainability, right? If technologies are explainable, humans will trust it. Now, the challenge with AI is AI makes it look very trustable. So we just have to be cognizant of the fact as what is truly explainable, auditable, right? And that is the part where I think there is a human in the loop. You can very easily blindly accept bad code recommended by a bad AI assistant. It's intended to be an assistant. It's not intended to replace your thinking prowess that the human brain has, right? It's much more complex. So if people start accepting that and models are learning from these at scale, then now you run into a different class of problems, right, that you don't have today. So those are the things to think about. And I think, how do we actually ensure that we address these risks? But they're no different than risks with any other technology revolution. It's just a magnitude order higher than what it has existed in the past.
100%. Speaking of trust now, how could we leverage AI while reinforcing customer trust? If we can take Boast AI, for example, I'd be curious to learn a bit more about that.
Yeah, 100%. I can take that just briefly here. Transparency is crucial, right? Like we need to explain how we use AI and how it impacts what we are offering. And in both cases, in fact, people are actually signing up with us because of that feature specifically, right? So, and then it goes without saying, but it's also important to indicate, following best practices for data protection and respecting privacy laws, depending on the region that you may be operating in. This is essential. And engaging customers with discussions about AI and allowing them to opt out if they prefer as well. Like, I think this is, again, depending on the state you operate in the US, this is a mandatory requirement, but it is still not as universal as it should be. From this standpoint, if I'm as a customer, especially on the consumer side, for example, we can opt out, but I think that mandatory requirement hasn't really translated into the business world yet when it comes to B2B data transaction. And then finally would be the ensuring the accuracy and reliability of the AI system, so that actually the customer, we don't have to explain that this is something like the data itself is gaining trust itself, like from a value proposition standpoint, right? Like if the customer is yielding better results because of the insights that they may be getting, that is the most accurate way of gaining trust. Obviously, you have to have the parameters around it with the data protection and privacy laws and opt-out and making sure that all of the safety net mechanisms are there.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I would say the accuracy, reliability of the data will build the most trust, I would say.
Yeah, I think John covered most of the points, and just add one more. I think it goes back to the point I made about explainability. If, at some point there is going to be regulations, but we don't want to wait for the regulations. We want to stay ahead of that. We want to be auditable, defensible in whatever we do. And I think as long as you have that capability with that, that complements your AI solution, then I think you can gain the customer trust. It's been proven, right? And trust is probably the single most important equity that drives customer adoption, as we all know, right? I think over a decade ago, I saw the trust companies like Amazon built, through their fraud prevention practices, which actually applies a lot of machine learning and so on, even before it was applied in the rest of the industry. And so, but we always had explainability as a requirement in some sense. Imagine your orders for holiday season are delayed because somebody suspected that the order was taken over by a fraudster, or the card was used fraudulently, a stolen credit card was used in your order, whatever the case may be. Imagine the customer trust in that moment of criticality if you didn't have the auditability, explainability behind why that order was sidelined for investigation and delayed. Those are the types of things we have to think about when we use AI. Is how can we build that trust? So that's why when you nail that is when your customers will come flocking to your solution and really look forward to leveraging your solutions.
Definitely. Well, I know we're at time, but gentlemen, thank you so much for all this knowledge. I think this is very useful, very exciting. Until next time, thank you.
Thank you, Asad.
Thank you, Asad. Great. Thanks, John.